I'll be able to hang in there.
What was the injury?
My knee.
The Green Bay Packers recently extended head coach Matt Lafleur, and I've been pretty vocal about not being a fan of this contract extension. In fact, I have had issues with Matt Lafleur for a few years now. And just over a year ago, I posted my first video to this channel with the title, "It's Time to Talk About Matt Lafleur." Today, I'm going to kind of react to that video and give an updated opinion on things that I mentioned following the 2024 season and anything new that happened in the 2025 season. So let's jump right into it. This year especially, it felt like he has a difficult time winning those big and meaningful games. And he has won a handful of those in the past, but it feels like more times than not, the Packers end up losing those big games. But not only do they just lose, there's always some aspect of the team that fails to show up, and they often start extremely slow. Most of the losses in the Lafleur era consist of a slow start, and the Packers are down big before they even realize a game is being played, and at that point, they rarely put up a real fight. Now, to Matt Lafleur's credit, he did win some big games this year. They had two big wins against the Lions on opening day and on Thanksgiving. They beat the Bears in Lambeau Field, who were the number 1 seed at the time, and they beat the Commanders in Week 2, a team that went to the NFC Championship game last year and had big expectations this year, but they did deal with injuries over the course of the season. And they won at Pittsburgh against Aaron Rodgers. However, they did have some other ugly losses with slow starts. The Packers lost to the Browns, Panthers, and Eagles in games in which the offense scored 10, 13, and 7 points. This type of stuff needs to be fixed. Though, as I said a few weeks ago, I do prefer them winning big games and losing games that they should win, rather than losing all of their big games and just winning against inferior teams. The elite teams need to be able to beat other elite teams. So for this remark, good for them to win big games, but bad on their part for their slow starts and some losses. Because of these big losses and slow starts, I question Matt Lafleur's leadership skills. I feel like there are other coaches in the league that always have their players ready to play. Dan Campbell, who I don't even think is that great of a coach, and Mike Vrabel are some guys that come to mind. And I'm not saying a head coach has to be a former player, but they do bring some grit and toughness that I can't say Lafleur has brought. I don't think Matt Lafleur is a motivator, nor does he inspire. Yeah, nothing has really changed here. I still don't think Matt Lafleur is a good leader. Like I said, I don't think he gets his guys ready to play at a high level every single week. This goes back to the slow starts comment. I just think he needs to be better at this, but unfortunately, I don't think this trait is learnable. You either have it or you don't. I think the Packers teams lately have just been soft too. It feels like they get manhandled by more physical teams. Let's look at the Ravens game, for example. They got absolutely dominated on the ground, with Derrick Henry running for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. I know Matt Lafleur isn't physically on the field, but I bet you Dan Campbell can get his players to play with more physicality than Matt Lafleur can. Another issue I have that aligns with this is that the offense just doesn't seem to stick up for their quarterback. There were multiple instances over the course of the season where Jordan Love takes a cheap shot and no one does anything in return. This is a bit contradictory to a point I will bring up in a bit, but I want to see them fight for their quarterback. Instead, they don't, and this is just all part of this same soft culture, which I believe starts with the head coach. And good on me for that shout out to Mike Vrabel. He's got his team in the Super Bowl this season. I do want to address a couple specific leadership issues. Matt Lafleur said in his post-game presser that the plan was to go up a couple scores and then pull their starters late in the game. That should always be the plan for every single game. You want to go up, you want to get your guys out healthy. It feels like a very half-in, half-out mentality. You should either play your starters with 100% effort and play to win the game, or just bench everyone and be fine with the loss and move on to the playoffs. Instead, you go the in-between route, resulting in multiple injuries and end up losing the game anyway. Well, the Packers were pretty much in the same exact situation this year, with the 7th seed locked up heading into Week 18, and Matt Lafleur learned from his mistakes by essentially resting every starter. Some of the starters did need to play because of just numbers, but they got out of Minnesota pretty much unscathed, minus the Bo Melton injury, which very well could have played a role in the playoff loss because he was one of their best players on punt coverage. But I still want to credit this decision as a win for Matt Lafleur as he learned from his mistakes last year. Another thing I want to bring up is the Monday following the playoff loss. Tucker Kraft stated in his locker room interview that,
well, we certainly didn't win anything. The whole
last few games that we played, you could kind of feel what was brewing for us. We just didn't finish. As a team, we need to wake up. Going forward, I'm gonna embrace everything that I've put into this game, and then take on a little bit more of a leadership role, and try to get people on the same wavelength that I'm on. I feel like I have a lot to offer in that aspect. So
my guess is that he meant they felt the loss coming. That should never happen in the locker room of an 11-win team, especially where one season prior they were about a play away from the NFC Championship game. One job of the head coach is to control the locker room, but based off of Kraft's comments, it didn't seem like Matt had full control. The 2024 Packers ended the regular season losing 3 out of their last 5 games and losing the final 2, while the 2025 Packers lost their final 4 regular season games. And as Tucker Kraft said, they just couldn't finish, and that was the same exact thing this year. It is remarkable how similar these seasons were, which to me just points out there wasn't much growth, and again, I think it starts with the coaching staff. Though, to the team's credit, I wouldn't say that they felt the playoff loss coming this year, and they did perform better in that game than the Eagles' playoff game a year prior. They should have beat the Bears, but they ultimately choked that game away too. I want to also note that I don't feel like Matt Lafleur lost control of the locker room, but the comments like going undefeated from Rasheed Walker should definitely remain within the team. Another thing I want to bring up, and I'm not sure this is directly a leadership issue, but the past couple of seasons the team has been very undisciplined and committed a lot of dumb penalties. You don't see this with other elite teams like the Lions or the Chiefs. And I get that the Packers have been the youngest team in the league the past 2 years, but that makes the head coach that much more important. This is yet another valid point, and I think we saw a lot of these issues again this year. Keyshawn Nixon cannot seem to keep his mouth shut. He always needs to be involved in the scuffle, and he had multiple 15-yard penalties called on him this season. Carrington Valentine likes to run his mouth too, but I can't remember him being penalized. And to give credit where it's due, Quay Walker has gotten better as well. But these 15-yard penalties are absolutely killer, yet so easily avoidable. I get Matt Lafleur isn't out there committing the penalties, but when it's the same thing over and over again with Nixon, the head coach has to do something about it. Other than complaining, Lafleur is awful at challenging plays. Again, I feel like he uses more emotion than logic when doing so. It took him 17 games this season until he finally won his first challenge, and overall he has posted a 17-25 record of 40% success rate for challenges. I cannot find data on Matt Lafleur's success rate on challenges this year, but I know he had some pretty dumb challenges over the course of the season. Though I will say he had some pretty decent challenges too. I do think he has improved here. I'm not sure if it is him or his guy in the booth, but I felt like they were better this year. I think there is still quite a bit of room for improvement here, but I do appreciate the slight improvement. I think his emotions get into play of play calling too. Sometimes he gets too cute or gets away from what is working. I think he is very impatient, and instead of sticking to the run, he likes to throw in a trick play or an end around that just kills the drive. I do think he's a front runner, especially when related to play calling. When it's going good, it's going great, but when they are down, he seems to fold. I've said this before, but I do not think Matt Lafleur is some great play sequencer or play caller. I do think he is a good designer. I think he can draw them up, but when it comes to the game, I think his sequencing needs to be better. I mentioned in the clip that he didn't stick to the run when it was working. Well, this year, he probably ran the ball too much when it wasn't working. I think he tries to execute his game plan regardless of the outcome on the field and often to a fault. To his credit, he didn't run as many end-arounds this year, but they had way too much horizontal passing. Jordan Love is very good at throwing the ball downfield. Outside of Matthew Golden's playoff touchdown, when did the horizontal passing even work this season? I know it's hard to call plays in the NFL, but it seems like Matt Lafleur makes it even harder because of his decision making. As for him being a front runner, I still absolutely believe that. When the offense is rolling, he looks great, but as soon as they face any sort of animosity, the offense looks terrible. I mean, look at the playoff game, for example. The offense should have scored on every drive of the first half of the game, but as soon as the defense adjusted, Matt Lafleur and the offense went missing. And for that reason alone, I blame the playoff loss on him. The last issue I want to bring up is his awful clock management. As Kurt Benkert often points out on Twitter, Madden players have better clock management than a lot of these head coaches, and I really don't see what's difficult about it, but it needs to be fixed. Going back to the Bears game, if Lafleur doesn't use a timeout before the field goal, they probably win that game. It was just a ridiculous decision. I can tell you right now that his clock management has not improved this season. Again, I don't understand what is so difficult about it. Every fan from the couch is better at knowing when to use a timeout or not than him. For a specific example, let's look at the Cowboys game. Matt and the Packers chose to run clock instead of looking to score a touchdown in overtime and win the game. And because of this poor clock management, the Packers were forced to take a tie and actually almost lost the game. The offense ended a play with 1 second left on the game clock. Now this is just one very significant instance, but there are other examples throughout the season too. This absolutely needs to get better. Now Matt Lafleur is a fine head coach relative to the entire league, but the goal is to win a Super Bowl, and I don't think he does that with the Packers anytime soon. And I'm tired of people on Twitter complaining that he is never in Coach of the Year talks. He is far from a top 5 head coach in the league, and I think he has overall underperformed in the playoffs in his 6 years as the Packers head coach. Now this could be an overreaction to the season, but I think I have seen enough, and I don't think anything will change with Matt Lafleur going forward. Unfortunately, this year I feel pretty much the same way about all that was just said. I don't think Matt Lafleur has what it takes to win the Super Bowl right now. I think he's a fine play designer, but I don't think he is some elite head coach. It's pretty much the same thing every year. Sure, he's improved at some things, but the expectations of this team are much higher than just getting better at challenging plays. The only other specific thing I want to mention is that the special teams continue to be bad, and as of this recording, Rich Bisaccia is still employed. And I think he will still be employed at the start of next season too, which is absolutely unbelievable. The special teams were directly responsible for 5 losses and a tie this season. They had a blocked field goal versus the Browns. They had a block extra point returned for 2 points versus the Cowboys. They had a missed field goal versus the Panthers in a game that they lost by 3. They had a missed field goal against the Eagles in a game that they lost by 3. They failed to secure an onside kick versus the Bears, and they had multiple missed kicks versus the Bears again in the playoffs. I don't understand how special teams can continuously be so bad without a major effort to improve it. I guess signing Bisaccia in the first place was one of those efforts, but he sucks too. The special teams are a major fault of Matt Lafleur and the Green Bay Packers. But oh, he has a .654 winning percentage. Yeah, but his record after Aaron Rodgers left is only 29-21-1 in the regular season and 1-3 in the playoffs, for a total record of 30-24-1. A very mediocre performance. Also, the Packers have existed for 106 years, but in the last 6 years, we've seen the most passing yards by a visiting quarterback at Lambeau, the most rushing yards by a visiting running back at Lambeau, the most blown 9-point leads by a Packers team, the only team to ever blow a 7-point fourth quarter lead to Kyle Shanahan, the only team in NFL history to lose 3 games without having to punt, and they gave up the most rushing yards allowed in the NFC Championship game. Again, I know Matt Lafleur isn't on the field, but I think these just show how complacent the organization has gotten. They are fine with a wild card playoff berth, and that's about it. And because of this, I was ready to move on prior to Matt LaFleur's extension, especially after an 18-point blown lead in the playoffs. They also blew leads of 10, 13, 9, and 10 in the regular season. I get that the players have to play, but I do see this as a coaching issue. But Ed Policy decided to bring back LaFleur anyway. And unfortunately, I don't see much changing next year. They'll probably be a wildcard team again, and they'll probably not make the NFC Championship game, which I think was the minimum expectations this year. Look, I will absolutely be rooting for them. Always will. There's not much more in life that I love than the Green Bay Packers, but I am heading into the next season as cautious because I don't trust the head coach.